Eat, sleep, bet, repeat. That's how we get down on the opening line at EliteSportsBetting.com. I'll be your host, Benny Ricciardi, and today I got my eSports specialist with me and the man who he's named after, our cat Moose right here, and my man Moose Elite from EliteSportsBetting.com and EliteFantasy.com and all the other elite family of websites that we got out there. What's going on today, Moose?
Another day in paradise. Rough couple of days. A lot of upsets in the league. So hoping to bounce back tonight. We had one lineup that cashed. Well, every lineup up to yesterday cashed. Yesterday was the first day I don't think we had a cash lineup, and it was because everybody on the lineup got upset. So that's all right. But we can do better. We get a 5-game slate tonight, and it's going to be much easier for us to find value, and we don't have to make crazy, stupid decisions.
So what I wanted to do today, and I think you'll be on board with this. I asked our Twitter followers yesterday to give us a bunch of questions that they wanted me to ask you along the esports,
Yeah, let's do it.
Line. A lot of it actually came down to GPP strategy. So I think we'll be able to answer a lot of these questions if we kind of go through building a couple lineups for tonight's slate. So I'm assuming you had a chance to look at it already?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's build some lineups, put some stuff together, and kind of walk people through. Now, I think you said you're doing 150 tonight, right?
Yeah. We're doing. I'm doing the Insomnia special tonight. I've been looking forward to the slate for a while. 5 really good games, should be exciting. Probably won't be sleeping.
All right, so cool. So let's use that as the slate that we'll talk about here. And like I said, I'll kind of turn it over to you. You're gonna put together your 150 lineups tonight. These guys want to know a little bit more about GPP strategy and how you build your GPP lineups. So go ahead and kind of give them the breakdown of how you're going to go about doing this.
Sure. Essentially, for a GPP, the real difference between a GPP and a cash lineup is that in a GPP, you want to make sure that you cover your bases for upsets. When you have a winning lineup, a lineup of all expected winners, that lineup may not necessarily hold 3 carries or 4 carries or really top-heavy people that you want to include in your captain slot. It's going to be a lineup that has a support player, a top player in the captain slot, and then it's going to have the typical arrangement of players. But it's a very safe lineup, and you're never going to win a GPP with having a safe lineup. You need to take a risk somewhere where you can fit more carries that are able to go off. So really, a GPP lineup is all about finding picks where you think that a team can upset, and then pairing it with another team that is also going to score really well, and that makes for the best GPP lineup. Last night, and what I've been seeing happen a lot lately, is that the LPL, the Chinese league, is having a significant rise in junglers doing really well. The aggression in the game and the early aggression is causing junglers to start getting a lot more kills and getting a lot more setups for team fights. And because of that, even last night, the winning lineup had a jungler in the captain slot. You don't need to fit a big carry, but now from there, it just requires team knowledge of which junglers do I want to focus on, which top laners do I want to focus on. But at this point, the slate is starting to bust open. It's not just 80 carry or mid in the captain slot. Now you can even think about, okay, well, I know this guy's really good. Why don't I put him in the captain slot? That kind of thing. It's all about finding the right players and the players that we like, which usually come from the article.
Yeah, so that's actually pretty interesting now because, normally you would think that, the most upside lineup you could build would be getting in a second AD carry or, a second midline player when you're up there in the captain spot. But you're saying now that, really you can kind of make lineups GPP-wise with anybody in the captain spot. Obviously, as long as you're putting a good player in there, but it doesn't really matter which position you're playing.
Yeah, there's some players that they just play carry champions, even if they don't play necessarily the carry role.
Right.
So they could play a jungler, and then they'll play if they're a jungler, but they're a really good jungler, then they can set up for like a jungler that is focused on being aggressive and getting kills and snowballing the early game, and that guy's gonna go off. And then there's also Invictus Gaming has a player called The Shy, and he plays top laners that are specifically only carry champions. So if the guy goes off, he goes off hard.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question then. You're making 150 lineups tonight. we talked a lot about the captain spot being, either a mid laner or an AD carry before. Of those 150 tonight, how are you going to be? Because that's actually one of the questions we had here is, how do you break down your captain positions? How are you planning on doing it tonight? Is it going to be like 50% AD carries and 20% mids, or how is that going to go?
Depending on the team, I like to pick my carry for a team. So just to kind of go over the slate tonight, just to kind of use for example, uh, so for like a team like Vici Gaming, I like both their carries. I think iBoy and Forge are just as good, and either one of them can do well. So in that case, I might play a little Forge, a little iBoy, depending on what carries I want. Looking at another example, for example, Top Esports playing WE tonight. That's going to be a high scoring game, I think. And their best player is their mid laner, Knight. He always outscores their AD carries. So it's just kind of like just personal preference and knowledge. It's not always necessarily like, oh, I want to jam as many AD carries as I can. But a lot of the times it really is that way. Like sometimes the AD carries just come through for you and it does well. A lot of other times people find, you know, the various plays that they can make where they all in on one stack and then they'll make like 20 of that stack. I've seen that happen a lot with the upper DFS guys. Is they'll say, okay, I really like this team and I want to pair them with this team, but instead of doing it once or 5 times, I'll do it 25 times. Right. So they're not hedging their bets. They're kind of picking and choosing and just getting lucky. But sometimes it pays off because I can't think of any other way that you just jam a jungler and just expect them to do better than everybody else. It's a good GPP play because it's not going to be something that's going to happen a lot in the captain slot, but it's starting to happen a lot more. And that is really what's going to differentiate your lineup from everybody else. Is even if you put a mid or a jungler in the captain spot, you'll already be differentiating yourself.
Yeah, and again, one of the things we always talk about in GPPs is having a unique lineup that nobody else has. So doing things that other people aren't going to do is one way that you can get there. I've also noticed on some of these lineups too, like if you're trying to play two of the heavy favorites, you kind of almost are forced to use somebody other than a mid or an AD carry in the captain spot.
Yeah.
You just can't afford to do it if you're trying to play, two of the teams where, the AD carries are, I don't know, like 8K or something, and everybody else in the team is in the high 7 range.
That's where you're going to have to go down and you're going to have to, make sacrifices. But sometimes those are the GPP plays that win. The GPP that I won, which was the North American GPP that we had a couple weeks ago, had a jungler in the captain slot because I couldn't fit anybody else in the carry slot. So I said, okay, I'll put the jungler in the captain slot, and then I'll just play my strategy and go from there, and it worked out. But that's kind of it's good because those kind of pricing differentiations force you to make those kind of moves. Mm-hmm. And in the end, it gives you a lot of diversity in your lineups, which is not a bad thing. Like tonight, for example, for like a cash lineup, I always try to set up a play where I want multiple players that I think are going to win. So the one team that I think is going to win tonight for sure is going to be Gen G, right? They're a massive, top favorite in the Korean League. So I think if I pair them with a Chinese team that I think is going to do well, like OMG or Top Esports, I can set up for a good lineup that it has a good foundation. But both of those teams with Gen G are favored. So that tells me that I'm not going to be able to fit all of my carries. I'm going to have to go with, Gen G's jungler, Clid, who's aggressive. I'm going to have to go with, OMG's jungler, Hacker, who's really aggressive, like something like that. And then from there, you kind of differentiate yourself and you figure out what lineups you want to play. And you're able to basically make a lineup that isn't just carry favored. But sometimes you have a slate where the whole slate busts open because a big dog wins. And, like looking at the cheaper stuff today, you have, for example, a team like Rogue Warriors who take a game off of everybody, even though they suck, are playing Vici, who have been pretty crappy lately. And then you have a team like WE who's playing Top Esports, and I don't know who's going to win that matchup. It's a very close matchup. Either one of those teams wins, and they win with a lot of kills. Whole slate busts open. Now you have nothing but carries everywhere. There's some sort of a weird carry mix. So it just depends on how the night goes. It's you're going to definitely want to own exposure to Chinese teams because they're more oriented around kills and aggression, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go with all favorites as well.
So let me ask another question based on something you said before here. One of the questions we got on Twitter yesterday was kind of about optimal stacks. Like, when you're putting stacks together, like, are you always building lineups where you're going like 4x3 with two different teams, or are you going like 4-2 and then just like throwing in whatever team you need to throw in to make it fit or something like that? How do you go about building your lineups when you're stacking stuff up?
So the more exposure you have to other teams, the more risk you undertake, and that's not safe for a cash.
Mm-hmm.
For cash, you definitely want to see if you can get 2 or 3 teams, but you want to make sure that those 2 or 3 teams are the teams that you're confident are going to win. Because even if you have one team that doesn't win, you're going to have issues. And those issues are very present. We had a lineup that barely cashed, I want to say, on a couple days ago, that had T1 who got wrecked, but they still put up pretty good points. But I had 2 players from that team, or no, I had 1 player from that team, and that 1 player alone caused me to be on the complete bottom scale of not cashing compared to cashing. So a lot of it just comes down to being able to minimize your risk when you're in a cash game mode, but also realizing that when you're playing cash in these tournaments, a lot of these people don't care about risk. They will take a dog with a heavy favorite, and then they'll just mix and match that and say, I think this team's going to win. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're wrong. But you're only going to notice the right ones because you're going to see who's at the top, right?
Yeah, you don't get to see the 50 lineups they had that finished in last place in the tournament.
Yeah, exactly. So with GPP though, what I've noticed is that a lot of people will take a 2-team stack and then they'll try to fit it their way, and then they'll say, okay, look, this stack works, but I want it to look more like this, but it's too expensive. So what do? They put a different team in the team slot, and they bank on that team winning. And the team slot is actually a really key portion, because although the team slot doesn't score nearly as many points as you would expect it to, you have the difference between a team 2-0ing and a team 2-1ing an opponent is huge, because if a team 2-1s an opponent, your team slot is going to be looking about 40 to 50 points. But if you have a 40-point team slot that 2-0s, you get an additional, I think it's 15 points in the team slot. So usually I see teams that 2-0 have really strong team slots. So a lot of times I'll see, for example, just looking at the teams pricing today, you can take a team like OMG at 5,200, and that team slot is significantly cheaper than something like a top eSports or a Vici or Damwon or Genji or anything like that. That is considered the weakest favorite, but I actually like them better than the other 2 Chinese favorites tonight. So you could make, for example, a Genji stack with top eSports, and you're like, this stack is going to be really cool. But for me to fit the players that I want, I have to fit the OMG team into my team slot. You're undergoing a bigger risk, but the reward is worth it.
Yeah, so you wouldn't even be opposed to doing something like a 4-2-1 stack then, or a 3-3-1.
No, not at all.
Okay.
And then if you're trying to stack the 2 heavy favorites, like for example on this slate it would be the Genji and the Damwon, so the 2 LCK favorites.
Right.
You're gonna have to pick players from other teams you think you're gonna win just to create that stack, because you're not gonna be able to fit all those players. It's physically not gonna allow you.
So here's the last question that we had from one of our subs here. They're saying, what are the stats that you weigh the most heavily when you're looking at, who you want to play on a certain team that you want to win? And where do you go to find those stats? Like, is there, like for baseball, a lot of us use fan graphs to get the numbers that we need or something like that. So what are the stats that are the most important to look at, and where do you actually go to get those stats?
So a lot of those stats are, so actually my favorite place is, you're gonna laugh, but is either DK or Fantasy Cruncher, because the fantasy points is really what I care about more so than the stats. But if you want hardcore league stats, there is 2 websites you can go. There's the Lolly Sports website that tells you every kill, every game, everything, and then there's also multiple League of Legends stats websites like Oracle's Elixirs and other stats websites that you can look up that will give you like the breakdowns of every single player. And the one stat that you always want to focus on is kills. The reason why is because it's the most scarce stat, and it's the stat that has, that occurs the least in a game. You could have a game with 4 kills. You could have a game with 12 kills. You could have a game with 27 kills, with 35 kills. And that is the real differentiator that comes to your lineup winning or somebody else's lineup winning. Which is why, actually, what I've been thinking about is that a lot of AD carries are also playing champions that are considered support AD carries.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not really going for kills. They're going for assists. So in that case, the mid is actually better because the mid is actually more set up to get the kills.
Right.
So, it's kind of give and take about what you think and what you think would be a good play. But yeah, essentially, where you really want to focus your attention is kills, especially supports that get a lot of kills. Those guys usually generate, if it's a high-scoring game, they'll get their 10 assists for the 10 assist bonus. They'll get good assists. Oftentimes, they're playing with certain support AD carry champions like Senna. They're actually going to get CS as well because Senna can actually collect CS. And then on top of that, when the supports get more kills, that they become supports that are actually getting, high fantasy points per game and separating you from the rest. Like on tonight's slate, for example, the top eSports support, a guy named QQ, has been averaging apparently 65 points per game. That's huge. That's like, obviously it's up and down. Some games he has 40 and some games he has 90, but that's still a significant difference.
Yeah, and you see that often because you actually see the supports most of the time, obviously, coming in as the lowest of all the positions out there, really. Like the AD carries and the mids and the top.
Yeah.
The junglers are usually scoring more than them. So if you can get a big game out of your support guy, that's going to give you a big leg up on everybody else in the field.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, focus on supports that you like and that are actually starting, because a lot of these supports are just going to sit or have issues. But also, the biggest thing that I use to compare stats is really just seeing like what a person averages. And if you're looking at a GPV play, you really want to look at ceiling. If you're choosing between 2 support players and one support player is a consistent 60 score, and then another guy scores 100 points, and then he scores 30 points, and then he scores 80 points, and then he scores 40 points. You want that guy. That guy's the X factor. Yeah. That guy's that's the guy that's going to give you anywhere between 60 and 100 points if that team wins. Whereas the other guy will consistently get you 60. You don't want a consistent in GBPs. You want the roof.
So one place that I've been having a little bit, because I've been doing very well in the cash games, following your cash game article here. My 50-50s, I'm not my 50-50s, I'm sorry. My GPPs, though, have been 50-50. Sometimes I put in a good lineup there. Sometimes my lineup absolutely sucks. But I think that's kind of the point, is that, you're trying to swing for the fences a little bit here. And one thing that I've been noticing is picking a lot of those 50-50 games, or the games with the closer, where like both teams, their team price is pretty close, and it's, one team or the other team is like plus 110 or minus 120, where the spread is a little bit closer there. I feel like those 50-50 games are really good for GPPs because a lot of people are staying away from them and trying to jam in a lot more of the favorites. Whereas if you can get the right side of those 50-50 games, I feel like I'm getting those guys at lower ownership, like a lot of them 10-15% owned, as opposed to some of the favorites who are 20 or 25% owned.
Yeah, and if they go off, you're gonna win all your cash games.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things where it's just like it's correlated with the whole slate, right? So if the things you play in cash go off, then you're obviously going to do well in GPPs because you probably like those people as well. But it's you kind of have to pick a side on everything. A lot of people pick different lineups and they pick different style matchups where it's really just up to you and who you think is going to win, and then from there you just kind of play it. Lately, it's been a lot of upsets, and a lot of people have been playing different stacks, different teams, slots, and people are getting smarter. Like they're starting to understand that you really just need to hit the right lineup as opposed to more so to just stack as many players as you can. So a lot of the times, they'll fit something in that may not make sense at the time, but does go off. So just kind of depends on what you want out of your slate and how you want it to do.
All right, so Moose, you got an article coming out tonight, or is it up already?
No, it'll be coming.
Yeah, so Moose still got a little bit of writing to do here today, but he'll have an article that'll be up on both Elite Fantasy and EliteSportsBetting.com, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it goes up on both of them, and I'll give you guys kind of a general idea of what I like. And people have been coming to me a lot and telling me how much they like the content and what they've been doing. So I do appreciate the support. Keep PMing me and stuff. I do like it. PM me when you're happy. Don't PM me when you're mad. But if you're gonna DM me at Moose Elite, make sure that you can ask me any questions. I'd love to help. I love to help as many people. And the only thing I don't want to do is I don't want to be the teacher that does the work for you. Like I don't want to be the guy that's like, hey, give me a cash lineup, or I looked at your cash lineup and I decided that this is what I'm going with and it's identical to mine. It's like, okay, man, like actually give it a shot, try it, mix and match. Which is why like sometimes I'll leave a slot open and I'll say pick your poison, right? Just like which player do you want to go with here? And then people will play me and just people will DM me and say, hey, I went with this player. Did you go with that player? And I said, well, I could have gone with that player, but missing the point here. The point is there's no correct answer. I don't know who's going to do what. I could be completely wrong. I could be completely right.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's like in a lot of other sports when we give out a core 5 or a core 4, depending on what the sport is. It's like, hey, these are the guys I like the most. There are 50 other ways you can go with this outside of those guys, but if you have that group as your core and you put in other guys that make sense from the article in general, you're probably going to wind up with a pretty good team that's going to get you over the cash line, and that's what it's all about. So anything else you want to add here before we sign off?
Yeah, I wanted to add a couple of things. If you're playing tonight's slate and you want to get a sneak peek at what my thoughts are, that OMG SN game is going to be probably my favorite game on the slate. Yeah, that's about it.
So you're on the OMG side of that game?
Definitely.
All right, so OMG definitely going to be a team that I include in some of my stacks here tonight. Big tournament. What's the big tournament tonight? Was it $15 buy-in, $100K to first?
Yeah.
Very top-heavy tournament, though, right? Like the bottom part of it is, I think you win like $20, $25 or something like that on the min cash. But again, we're not trying to min cash here. We're trying to take it all down and win that.
Yeah, exactly. If you wanna make money, you're not gonna min cash. You gotta go for the big league. So pick the lineup that you like. Go from there. You can't lose. If a lot of it is nobody's like, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I know a lot about esports, but if you just watch the games and you pick a side, you could be more correct than I am on any given day.
Yep, and that's what it's all about here, and that's the way we try to get it down. So, like I said, if you're an Elite Fantasy subscriber, Moose's article will be out a little later on today. If you're an Elite Sports Betting subscriber, the article will be up over there too, as well as whatever picks he has if there's any teams that he really wants to bet on. One thing that I have noticed, especially if you're building cash game lineups, make sure you look at the teams that Moose said he likes to win, and make sure those are the guys that wind up in your lineup, because that's been working out pretty well for me there. So for Moose, this is Benny signing off for another episode of The Opening Line at EliteSportsBetting.com.